Melissa Walker sipped her morning coffee as she reviewed the emails on her phone. The sunlight poured through the living room window, casting a warm glow on her slightly tired face. She worked as a chief accountant at a small firm in Cleveland. Which city are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. And hey, make sure you watch till the end. Something's going to happen that you won't see coming. Ohio. It was a demanding job, but she loved the stability it provided. Her thoughts drifted to her 8-year-old son, Michael, who was staying at her parents' house for the time being. Michael had been staying there while she prepared for the arrival of her second child, a baby girl, due in 3 weeks. Michael, time to get up, or you'll be late for school. She called out, but there was no response. Suddenly, she realized that Michael was with her parents. Her hand rested on her large belly, feeling the soft movements of the baby, and her mind shifted to the birth ahead. A few weeks earlier, she had shown signs of premature labor, and her doctor had recommended complete bed rest. I'll be fine. She reassured herself, knowing that Michael was well cared for. Her parents, though, had seemed a little off recently. Her mother, Judith, had been acting a little less warm than usual, and her father, Lawrence, seemed distant. Yet, she trusted them with Michael, hoping their love for him would overcome any of their personal struggles. On the phone, she spoke to her mother, Judith, trying to reassure herself. Thank you so much for watching Michael for a bit, Mom. Her mother's voice came through the line, cheerful but slightly distant. Don't worry, honey. Just focus on the baby. Leave Michael to us. But the background sounds of slot machines were unmistakable, and her concern began to grow. Are you at the casino again? She asked, half joking. Oh, it's just a little fun. You know your dad and I go once a week to unwind. It helps us relax, Judith responded, but the uneasy feeling in Melissa's chest grew. After Melissa hung up with her mother, the unease lingered in her mind. She tried to push it away as she focused on the baby, but the feeling of something being off stayed with her. Her parents, who had always been meticulous, now seemed distant and preoccupied. Still, she trusted them, knowing they would look after Michael. She couldn't focus on that too much, not when there was a newborn to prepare for. It was only a few days later that Melissa went into premature labor. It all happened so fast, a rush to the hospital, an emergency C-section, and a tiny baby girl, Emma, who was born with complications. The doctors said she would need to stay in the hospital for a little longer. Can I talk to Michael? She asked her nurse, her voice strained but hopeful. She dialed her parents' number, but this time, there was no answer. The ringing echoed through the empty space around her, and she felt a cold knot in her stomach. It had been a few days now, and the calls from her mother had become more sporadic. The noise in the background, the sound of slot machines, was always there. I don't know what's going on with them, she muttered to herself, but she tried to remain calm. The baby was her priority now. For the next few days, Melissa was able to briefly speak with Michael, hearing his voice every now and then. But the calls grew less frequent, the music in the background louder, and her mother's tone grew more distracted. It was on the 10th day after Emma's birth that Melissa finally received permission to leave the hospital. Holding Emma in her arms, she made her way out of the sterile, white hospital room. But something felt very wrong. Michael had been out of contact for too long. Where is everyone? She whispered, dialing her parents' number again with no luck. Michael? Her voice grew frantic as she paced around, the tight feeling in her chest growing heavier. What's going on? She muttered, anxiety building. She took a taxi and headed straight for her parents' house, hoping they had brought Michael back there. But the silence inside the house greeted her when she entered. She called out, hoping for a response, but none came. The home, once warm with laughter and activity, felt cold and abandoned. Her heart was pounding now as she walked through the house, feeling the absence of Michael's presence in every room. There were no signs of him having been here. No shoes by the door, no toys scattered around. She quickly headed to her parents' house. When she arrived, everything seemed strangely quiet. The usual welcoming feel was replaced with a cold, eerie stillness. Mom? She called out. There was no response. Dad? Where's Michael? She called out again, her voice shaking. Suddenly, she heard a faint sound coming from the backyard. She walked toward it, the hair on the back of her neck standing up. There was something in the shed. The shed. Lawrence had kept a pig there years ago, but now it seemed neglected and untouched. She cautiously approached the shed, wondering why she was being drawn to it. As she reached for the door, she heard a soft sobbing from inside. With A sudden burst of adrenaline. She pushed the door open, and there, in the darkness, she saw Michael sitting on the cold floor, holding something in his hands. Her heart stopped when she realized what it was. He was eating pig feed. The horror surged through her as she ran toward him, tears threatening to spill from her eyes. "Michael, what are you doing?" she cried, her voice breaking. Her son looked up at her in surprise, his small body trembling with fear. "Mommy, I'm hungry," he sobbed, his voice so small, so fragile. "Grandpa and Grandma didn't come back. They said they would bring food, but I was scared, Mommy." Tears filled Melissa's eyes as she rushed toward her son. He was shivering, his face pale, and his body was cold to the touch. She wrapped him in her arms, desperately trying to calm him. "It's okay now, Michael. Mommy's here. I'll never let this happen again. You're safe now." She pulled him into a tight embrace, but inside, Melissa was seething with rage. The anger was boiling over. Her parents had abandoned her son, left him alone for days with no food. Her parents had failed her. Melissa rushed back to her own house with Michael in her arms, feeling a sharp mixture of guilt and rage. Her parents, the people she had trusted her whole life, had betrayed her, left her son hungry in a pig pen, uncaring and oblivious to the damage they had caused. As soon as they arrived, Melissa set Michael down, giving him a warm bath, carefully cleaning the dirt and grime off his skin. He had been through so much in the past few days, his small frame trembling, his face pale from dehydration and fear. Melissa tried her best to soothe him, her hands shaking as she dressed him in clean clothes. Afterward, she prepared a meal for him, simple but filling, just the way he liked it. Michael ate ravenously, as if starved for both food and love. But even after he finished eating, his eyes remained filled with worry. "Will Grandpa and Grandma come back soon?" Michael asked in a small voice, his eyes downcast. Melissa froze. The question cut through her like a knife. What was she supposed to say? Her parents, Judith and Lawrence, had caused this pain. "I don't know, Michael," Melissa answered carefully, not sure how to break the news to him. "But for now, it's just us. We're going to be okay, okay?" Michael nodded, though he clearly didn't believe her. She could see it in his eyes. Later, Melissa checked Michael's body for any signs of injury. Fortunately, he seemed physically unharmed aside from some mild dehydration. But the mental trauma was worse. She could see the emotional toll it had taken on him. That night, after Michael had fallen asleep, Melissa sat on the couch, her hands tightly clutching a piece of paper. It was a letter from her mother. She had written it several times, always trying to explain herself, and every time, Melissa had torn it up in frustration. But this one, she couldn't destroy. "I'm sorry, Melissa," the letter began. "I don't know what's happened to us. We've lost our way. We didn't mean for any of this to happen, but I understand if you never want to forgive us." The words barely registered in Melissa's mind. Her parents had stolen her son's future. They had abandoned him, allowed him to suffer, and now they were apologizing? But even though the anger was overwhelming, something else began to stir. Inside of her, a small, tentative understanding. Addiction was a disease, a terrible disease that had controlled Judith and Lawrence for far too long. But did that make their actions forgivable? The phone rang, cutting through the heavy silence. In the room, Melissa picked it up. It was her mother again, calling for the fourth time. She let it ring, feeling torn between wanting to ignore her and needing answers. Finally, after hanging up, she sat down on the couch with a heavy sigh, closing her eyes. The next day, she decided to take action. Melissa called Child Protective Services and filed a report. "My parents have abandoned my son," she explained through trembling lips. "They left him alone for days. He was starving and scared. Please, help us." The worker on the other end was calm but serious. "We'll send someone out today, ma'am. We're taking this seriously." It sounds like a case of child neglect, possibly abandonment. Melissa hung up the phone, still processing the weight of what had happened. Her parents were no longer the dependable, trustworthy figures she had grown up with. The trust she had placed in them had been shattered. That afternoon, Melissa met with Carol Johnson, the CPS caseworker. Carol was a woman in her 50s, with a warm smile and sharp eyes. After speaking with Michael and hearing the full story, Carol agreed that this was a serious case. "We'll need to consider reporting this to the police," Carol said seriously. "But first, let's make sure Michael gets the help he needs. He might be dealing with emotional trauma, as the days passed, Melissa struggled with her feelings. The love for her parents had always been so strong, but it was tainted now. How could she ever forgive them? They had taken her son's future and gambled it away, both literally and figuratively. A few days later, Sarah, Melissa's trusted lawyer, called her. "I have bad news," she said. "Your parents took out $50,000 from Michael's education fund, and they've racked up over $150,000 in credit card debt, mostly from gambling." Melissa was stunned. "They? What? How could they?" She felt the world shift beneath her feet as Sarah continued. "This is clearly gambling addiction at play. We need to take legal action. This isn't just emotional trauma, it's financial abuse." Later that night, as Melissa sat with Michael in the living room, the doorbell rang. She stood up, feeling a rush of anxiety. Who could that be? She opened the door to find Judith and Lawrence standing there, their faces pale and filled with regret. "Melissa," Judith said softly, "we've been wrong. We've been getting help." Melissa stared at them, unsure of how to respond. "You left my son starving. You left him alone for days. And now you want me to believe you?" "We're sorry," Lawrence said, looking down, his voice breaking. "We didn't mean to hurt him. We were just so caught up in our addiction." But Melissa couldn't hear their excuses anymore. The damage had been done. After the confrontation with Judith and Lawrence, Melissa felt a strange mix of relief and anger. She had demanded the truth, and now it was out in the open. Her parents had confessed to their actions, but Melissa knew that their words were just that, words. The hurt, the damage, and the fear her son had endured could never be erased with an apology. For days, she kept her distance from her parents. She didn't want to engage with them, and yet, their faces kept haunting her. She didn't know what was harder, the fact that they had betrayed her, or the fact that she had to somehow find it in herself to decide whether or not she could ever forgive them. The weeks passed, and Michael began to heal, physically at least. Melissa had ensured he received counseling for the trauma he had suffered, and bit by bit, he was becoming the happy boy he once was. But emotionally, Melissa was still struggling. Her parents had been a part of her life, her backbone, her mentors. To see them unravel the way they had, to realize they were capable of harming her son, was something she couldn't shake off. One afternoon, Melissa received a letter from Judith. This time, it wasn't the usual angry outburst or defensiveness. This letter was different. "I know you don't want to see us, and I understand why," it started. "We have done things to you and Michael that can never be forgiven. But I need you to understand that Lawrence and I have realized the gravity of what we've done. We've sought help. We're changing, and it's because of you and Michael." The letter went on to express guilt, sorrow, and a longing for Melissa's forgiveness. Judith promised that they were seeking professional treatment for their addiction, and would do everything they could to regain their family's trust. Reading it, Melissa felt her heart ache with a mix of emotions. She had been so angry, so hurt, that she had shut them out. But reading those words made her feel something else. It made her feel like they were still her parents, despite everything. After a long, quiet evening, Melissa made a decision. She would go see them, not to forgive them immediately, but to see if they had truly changed. The next afternoon, Melissa and Michael visited Judith and Lawrence at their small apartment. It was a modest place now, far from the luxury they once enjoyed. As they entered, Judith was waiting by the door, looking nervous but hopeful. Lawrence sat at the small table, his eyes avoiding hers. "Hi, Mom, Dad," Melissa said quietly, her voice trembling as she glanced at Michael, who was standing beside her. "It's been hard," Judith said, holding her hands together, clearly unsure of how to approach the situation. "We don't expect everything to be fixed just like that. We understand the pain we've caused. We've been working on ourselves," Lawrence added, his voice hoarse. "We know we've let you down, but we want to make things right." Melissa stood there for a moment, absorbing their words. Then she looked down at Michael, who was still unsure about being there. "I don't know if I can forgive you yet," Melissa said, her voice steady, but full of emotion. "But I see you're trying. That means something. I just need time. And so does Michael. We can't just erase what happened, but maybe we can rebuild slowly." Judith's eyes welled with tears. "Thank you. We're going to prove that we can be better. For you and Michael." A few weeks later, Melissa had made the difficult decision to allow Judith and Lawrence to spend time with Michael again, but under strict supervision. It was slow progress, but she could see the effort they were making. They had attended counseling, gotten part-time jobs to repay their debts, and were making efforts to stay sober. And although Melissa didn't feel ready to forgive them entirely, she knew that the healing process would take time. Her own heart was torn, but she was willing to move forward for Michael's sake. One summer afternoon, as they were having a picnic in the park, Michael ran around with a big smile on his face. He was happy again. Melissa sat beside Eric, her heart swelling with a mixture of relief and sadness. "He's doing so much better," Melissa said, watching Michael play. "We've all been through so much, but I'm proud of how far we've come." As the day came to a close, Melissa glanced at Eric, her eyes filled with gratitude. "We're finally on the right path. Whatever happens with my parents, I know we're strong enough to move forward together." And with that, Melissa realized something important. Healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about learning from it and finding a way to move forward, no matter how hard it may be.